What we do here is go back.
Welcome to the Hustle Sold Separately, episode 163. We are a weekly podcast dedicated to doers, creators, entrepreneurs, hustlers, CEOs, innovators, people in and around the world that are really on their journey. They're sharing their stories in real time, what they're learning. We always say that we don't glamorize or glorify end success because it's anything but that, and it's anything but overnight. And so whether it's our guests or our personal narratives, we like to talk about what is happening in real time because that relates more often to our audience so they can humanize the journey and understand that we're all really at this, we're all similar in a lot of ways, it just probably in different phases, right? But it's all relatable. I'm Matt Gossman, founder and editor-in-chief of hdfmagazine.com and HDF Magazine on Instagram, as well as at Matt Gottesman on Instagram. You can find me there, DM me, and we can get in touch. And this week's theme is going to be really interesting, something that I can tell you anybody I know deals with, I have dealt with at multiple phases. I'm very open about it. Maybe I should be even more open about it, and I'll probably reveal a few things on this podcast as well. But it's about removing blockages that prevent you from growing as an entrepreneur or a creator or somebody really going after their dream. And really, I could say really as a human being in general, but obviously we have a lot of passionate, driven people on our audience. And how do you... when you're previously I was talking about this, that when you're going after your thing, whether it's your dream or the job that you want to do or pursue something that really means something to you, you have external inputs and you have internal inputs. And external inputs, more often than not, just people misunderstanding or just not understanding at all why it is you want to do what you want to do, or why would you take the leap, and what does it all mean, and that's just from an external standpoint, not really for them. It's not their journey, but it can be definitely get in your head and get in your vibe and get in your way. Then we have the internal inputs, which we know can really mess with us. And these are the stories we sometimes tell ourselves based since when we were really, really young. And whether they came from triggers or experiences and, or spiritual, whatever it might be, sometimes we carry things and then we can get really hard on ourselves when we're trying to really pursue something, when really we just can make things much more simpler and just move through things, get rid of all the blockage and actually just, be our whole authentic selves. So today's guest is Katie Kyleen, and she's a spiritual psychologist and founder of Arizona Spiritual Events. This woman has been doing it for quite some time, and her journey started when the doctors told her she had an incurable virus that was cancer causing. And after a long search for a cure, she discovered a healing that gave her a miraculous cure herself. She actually cured herself of this cancer at a very young age, and she now calls this healing gateway healing and works primarily with individuals that have physical, emotional, or mental blockages in their life. And she believes that every problem in our life has an energetic solution, and she now teaches healing internationally all over the world, as well as her home state. And it's interesting. I'm grateful to have this guest on for countless reasons, but more importantly because I don't really think it's just entrepreneurs or the high achievers or the dreamers or the people really going after anything that they want. I feel like it's all human beings can get in their own way. So thank you, Katie, for being on the show.
It's great to be here.
So as I was telling you previously, what we typically like to do is sort of what happened, because if I just said on the air right now that you cured yourself, that is insanely miraculous, and that also led to your life's work. So what happened in that moment, brief background, and then got us to today, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. So my story is a very vulnerable story. It's a little bit of a personal story, which I'm happy to share. And it all started when I was younger, and I was living with my family back in the Middle East. And my family was a really strict family, really rigid. I want to say very religiously fanatic. And I remember I was raised in the Muslim tradition, and please don't get me wrong, for all those Muslim people out there, I think Islam is so beautiful. I just had such controlling parents, especially my father at the time. And, when I was younger, we had to all wear the burqa, and we were only allowed to show our eyes, and we weren't even allowed to wax our unibrows or wear contact lenses. So I had a unibrow, big glasses, and a burqa. I literally looked like E.T., and we weren't allowed to have anyone in our house. So, if someone came, let's just say to visit me, a friend or anything of that nature, I literally had to have someone chaperoning all the time.
Oh.
Yeah, in the room. It was really, really rigid, and we weren't allowed to have cell phones or just anything of that nature. And year after year, it just got harder and harder, because the more you grow up as a woman there, the stricter they become. Finally, because of a series of events, my parents ended up getting a divorce, but I ended up staying with my dad, who was the stricter of the two. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And I kind of started feeling like I'm jailed in a little bit. And I finally moved in with my mother after, I think, a year of wanting to move in with her. She took me in. And, Matt, have you ever been in a I want to say a cage, and you're finally, the jail doors open and you just fly out like a bird and just swing to the other side of the pendulum? Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, of sorts. Yeah. A few years ago.
And so I swung to the other side of the pendulum. I used to pray 5 times a day and fast, a lot, and just uber religious. And I remember just taking off my burqa, dyeing my hair blonde, and, wearing these high stiletto heels, and not even mini skirts. I was wearing micro skirts, and I started going out, and I want to say clubbing 5 nights a week, drinking extremely heavily, and also sexing a lot as well. So I really swung to the other side of the pendulum. Long story short, one day I look down at my vaginal area and I start seeing these dots, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, what is this? I'm sure they'll just, go away. But as a few weeks passed by, I realized they're not pimples. It looked like they were something more. And I didn't know who to tell. I couldn't tell my mother, and I couldn't tell my father. So I ended up telling my best friend. And so she took me to the doctor. And when I went to the gynecologist, she did a series of tests on me, and she said she was going to call me back in for the results. And when I got called back in a few days later with the results, she said to me, Katie, you have a virus that's called HPV. And once you have this virus, it's with you for life. It's not something that you can cure. It's always going to be in your system. It can go dormant once in a while, but it's always testable and traceable, and it's always with you. And I just remember feeling so sad, Matt, at this young age, knowing that I have an STD. Because, as Middle Eastern women, we were raised to believe that, we're here to get married and have kids. And I remember thinking, gosh, who's going to want to marry me, with these growths and knowing that I have HPV. So I was so sad when I heard that. And again, I wasn't educated. And she continues to say, Katie, I have more news for you. You have cervical cancer. Ooh. And, just knowing I have a virus is enough for me, was enough. And then adding that I had cervical cancer was just too much. And I remember looking at my friend and my friend looking at me, and both our jaws just kind of dropping to the floor. And so, and she said to me, Katie, it's past just, being able to go in and remove the cancer cells. You're going to need full treatment. So you're going to have to get parental consent from your father or your husband to get treatment started. And the moment she said that, I totally blacked out, because I was so afraid of my father. And of course, I wasn't married at the time. And because of Middle Eastern law, I couldn't have any treatment done without male consent, familial male consent. So I went home and I started walking back and forth thinking, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And my fear of my parents, especially my father, was worse than the fear of the cancer and the virus. And so I was so naive at that time, and I thought to myself, you know what, I'm just going to naturally heal this. I'm spiritual. I'm going to naturally heal this. I'm going to wave my magic wand and it's going to heal. Like such a naive girl. I just thought that I could Google the answer and, there it would pop up. And so, Matt, that's exactly what I did. I Googled the answer. How do you cure cancer? And I changed my diet around. I went full green vegan. I started seeing this energy healer once a week that healed, physical issues. I did everything in my power I could to try and heal this naturally. But month after month after month, it got worse and worse and worse. The growths on the outside that I had continued to just keep growing and morphing into something extremely weird looking. By the 6th month, they started growing all over. By the 7th month, I'm feeling even worse. I started to feel this cramping in my cervix area. And by the 8th month, the cramping turned into absolute pain. And so one day I look at the calendar and I realize 8 months had passed by and tomorrow was going to be the first day of the 9th month. Have you ever been slapped out of denial before?
Yes. Several times.
That was my moment of being slapped out of denial. Like, this is not working. And have you ever had those moments where you're at your low of low and you get this feeling of nothing in this world, in this physical world, can help you? Like, it's like you reach that surrender point when you're on your knees and you're crying and you're just in the low of low. Have you ever had those moments?
Yes, including everybody listening and every guest on the show.
Yeah, and I call those the surrender moments.
Yeah.
It's like, and so I was on my knees, literally on the floor crying, saying, God, I beg you, please help me. I was so afraid. Again, I was just so fearful. And so as I'm on the floor and I'm crying, I get this overwhelming feeling that came through me of, Katie, do a healing session on yourself. And that was an interesting idea for me because I had always, I'd gone and received different types of healings. I'd read a lot of spiritual books, but at that time I wasn't really spiritual. I was just book smart spiritual. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't experientially spiritual. I hadn't applied any of the wisdom into my life. So, but I was like, you know what do I have to lose? So I go and I lay down on my friend's bed and I start to breathe real hard. And with every breath, I just draw God in. With every breath, I just draw God in. And I only had one prayer in mind. I beg you, God, please heal this. Please heal this. And as I did this over and over and over again for 45 minutes straight, at the end of the 45 minutes, I had the most phenomenal feeling that there was this amazing presence in the room. It literally felt like a presence was in the room. And I had this most phenomenal feeling of ecstasy, but peace at the same time. And the energy almost felt tangible. And for all of you that have had spiritual experiences, it's very hard to put them into words. And that was probably one of the most profound spiritual experiences I'd ever had up to that point. Fast forward, 3 days later, I looked down at my vaginal area because, like I said, those growths were continuing to grow. And as I looked down in the morning, they had all disappeared, Matt. All of them had disappeared all at once. There wasn't one dot, one blemish, nothing. It's like an Amazon forest being cleared out, just to give you a little bit of a visual that you didn't need. And I had this strength inside of me of, you know what, I'm ready to tell my parents. I'm going to tell my mother, even though my mother is never going to look at me the same. And she's going to be so disgusted because, she's a very much don't have sex until marriage type of a woman. very conservative, and hopefully my mother would just kind of give it off to my father and kind of be the in-between. So my plan was to go get retested and then take those tests to the doctor because take those tests to my mother, and I just knew I couldn't sweep the cancer underneath the rug anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I go and I get retested, and this is now 9 months later. I go to the same doctor, and she does the whole thing on me, and I got a call from her assistant 2 days later saying, Katie, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, but you're going to have to come back in and we're going to have to retest you again. And I said, why? And they said, we mixed up some of your lab reports. And I remember thinking in my head, how inefficient. Like, you mixed up some of my lab reports. I'm not sure if I want to come back to you.
Right.
But she said, it's for free. We'll take care of it. I'm like, okay, well, it's for free. I'll go back.
Right.
So I went back in and they retested me all over again. And I want to say 3 or 4 days later, I was again in the doctor's office with the results. And she had 2 files in front of her. One was the old tests from, a week ago, and one was the test from, 4 days or 3 days ago. And she says to me, Katie, we came to test what strand of HPV you have because there's so many different strands. And we couldn't find your HPV in both tests. And that's why we wanted to retest you. We thought we'd mixed up lab reports. And then she said, Katie, what work have you done on yourself? And I said, I haven't done any work, and I've come here to figure out what our next steps are. And she says, there's no trace of cancer.
Wow.
And then she says, what work have you done on yourself? And immediately when she said that the second time, Matt, I remembered the healing session I'd had, a week and something ago. And I realized that that was a miraculous healing. So that was my first taste of knowing that there's an unseen energy out there, and that if we tap into it, we can really heal any blocks on any level of our being.
Damn. I don't think we've had that yet on the show where somebody said that they, cured themselves. But that's amazing. And so that propelled you. Was that like this is part of my life's purpose, and I want to explore how to help heal the world.
That literally became my mission of how do we tap into this unseen energy that is everybody's birthright. Right. And how do we heal the blockages that are stopping us from moving forward in our life? And not just physical, it could be, creative blockages. It could be blockages to success. It could be all sorts of different blockages.
Are people pretty receptive, from the unseen, or at least we're living in a time now where people are a lot more awakened than ever before, right? So absolutely.
There's a lot of spiritual people rising right now. That's usually not a problem at all.
I mean, you find even just even some kind of everyday, mom and dads at this point are also kind of really making that shift as well too. You're seeing it everywhere. It seems like. It
seems a lot of people are looking for alternative solutions because they're tired of going the regular route.
Yeah, I like how you said the regular route. So let's, and you can, feel free to use any examples from any patients that you've had. How can blockages affect one's personal and professional growth? Especially, we talk about entrepreneurs because we have a lot of listeners that are entrepreneurial. Do you have any great examples of how this happens and kind of sometimes maybe the steps that were taken to kind of remove that blockage?
Absolutely. So entrepreneurs can actually have a lot of blockages towards success. And each case is very different. I've seen so many different reasons that have different blockages inside. And Matt, when I talk about blockages, I'm not talking about what's on the outside. Because sometimes we look at our, anger, our frustration, our impatience, and we think that those are the blockages. And they're actually not. Those are actually really surface level, and underneath there's usually a completely different story that's going on. So, I've seen so many entrepreneurs want success, hunger for success, and on an outer level, they're really doing their best to reach out for it, without knowing that subconsciously underneath the surface, what they're not aware of, there's a totally different programming going on, a totally different backstory that's going on that's literally working against all that they're trying to do outwardly. And I call that the sponsoring thought. There's always a root sponsoring thought that is causing all the blockages. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah, it does. I mean, I've seen, I've even watched myself where I, on the outside, might seem like I'm angry at something, but something else triggered that has nothing to do with what the words I'm using. And that's why you have to really become present and understand what the hell's going on deep down inside,
Exactly.
Yeah, get to the root cause.
Exactly. And I have a few good entrepreneurial stories to share to kind of give you a different flavor of how people have different blockages in different ways, and how they can look different. So, there was this girl that came to me once. She was a client, and, she was working a corporate job, Matt, that she was miserable. Miserable. And by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with corporate jobs. I think some people are really meant to have really beautiful, structured jobs in this lifetime. I'm not here to poo-poo that at all.
Yeah.
But she was just very miserable, and after years of misery and living paycheck to paycheck, and it started causing a deep depression inside of her. And that depression, finally, when we hit the depths of depression, we start soul searching,
Mm-hmm.
So she starts soul searching and thinking, what is it that I really love doing? And so as she was soul searching, she started to realize that she has an intense love for Chinese medicine. I mean, intense love. She was actually really obsessed about it. And the knowing of that started coming to the forefront for her. And, but she thought to herself, I'm already, 35 and, I've already got my career going. How on earth am I going to change it? But, after a lot of, I want to say being stuck in her depression, it kind of pushed her to move forward. So she made the brave decision of studying acupuncture while working full time, which is really, really hard.
Yeah.
And you literally come from work and you have to jump to school. And she started going to night school. And after 5 years of really hard work, she graduated and got licensed as an acupuncturist. And that's wow, right? You're like, woohoo, you're finally in your life purpose. That's so exciting.
That's just the beginning.
That's exactly it. And so, and what's really interesting, Matt, sometimes when people go through school, their love for something becomes less.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But for her love for it became even more.
Wow.
I mean, it was a real calling for her. She was really on path, in alignment with what she's here to do. And so she started realizing that she couldn't have a full-time practice, open up her practice, give her energy into her practice, and have a full-time job. So she finally quit her job, which was one of the bravest things she could have done, especially when you're so used to leaning in on a job for so long for security. And she went into her, starting to create her acupuncture practice. And Matt, she did such a good job putting herself out there. I mean,
which is everything.
Which is everything.
Right.
Most people have an issue participating. That was not her issue at all.
Yeah.
She was out there participating at networking events, women's luncheons, wellness conferences. I saw her on Facebook speaking at different places, really sending out that message of, what it is that she does and that she's available to do it. And what's really interesting is 1.5 years after doing this, she wasn't having a lot of movement in her business. Like, she barely had any business to sustain her. And she put a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of blood and sweat into it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there still wasn't a lot of movement. And that's what brought her, sitting on my couch in front of me for a healing session. And so, she explained her situation to me, and I really realized as she was talking, she's really participating and she's really doing it right. But she just wasn't getting any response from the people, which was really, really weird.
Yeah.
I kind of got this feeling as, when people are speaking to her, it kind of goes in one ear and out of the other.
Yeah.
Which is, it's such a shame, especially when you're putting that much output out. But I really wasn't sure of exactly what was going on. So we laid her on the healing table and we did a healing session. And, as we're doing the healing session and I'm just kind of intuitively feeling into the energy, first this layer of doubt comes up in her energy mat. It was just a layer of emotional doubt, And then after the layer of doubt, there was this layer of, I want to say, it felt like a shaky trust in herself. And then right underneath that, another layer came up. And it was the layer of, and this felt like it was underneath all the other ones. And it felt like a total lack of belief in her talent.
Which, not to interrupt your story, but I mean, all three of these things you just mentioned, I think a lot of people go through that.
And they all work hand in hand.
It's very common.
They're like layers of a cake.
Right.
That kind of work together, very much so. And, but she wasn't, after the session, I kind of, she sat up and we spoke and, I told her all that I felt. And she said, you know what, Katie? If I were to be really honest, there's a part of me that doesn't believe this is going to make a big difference in the life of others.
That's big.
And bam, there is your root sponsoring thought. There is that blockage that is literally stopping her from attracting those people into her life. And Matt, this is such a big epidemic that's going on in the entrepreneurial world right now. Is a lot of people have a lack of belief in their talent, they have a lack of belief in their product, or they have a lack of belief in what they're actually doing is actually making a difference or not. And that, I would say, is one of the major blockages that entrepreneurs have. Just as because I'd love to get you don't even have to have an opinion about this, but I'll tell you, it's a mix of old and new, because I've gone through this myself and I'd like to be vulnerable about it for a minute, is that if you look at traditional business and results, or even sports, the results are numbers. But like the world is not so black and white. Like everything isn't always numbers. And I'll tell you, so like I'm just kind of, you're opening me up here on the air, just like thinking about this, is that like sometimes the things that I dealt with too, and sometimes still can, is that like when you're talking about like positioning someone's brand or building their company for scale, that's a long-term game. They may not see it right away. Now they'll see them building something, but if you're not like sports, where it's like, at the end of 4 quarters, we know that the score was 42-40, like who won? Or, you just made $1,000 this last month or $10,000 last month. Oh, there's our physical result, and you see this also like with the fitness industry, like, they used to weigh 140 pounds and they weigh 132 pounds. Like numbers. Everything is so simple because we have a number, there's a result, that's it. And that results, a lot of times, there's also a gray area where they have to be worked towards. Like you have to like reshape your mind. You have to reshape the way you approach things. You have to like put yourself out there. You have to build for other things. It's not always just numbers. And so, I mean, it's just kind of my own rant, but like that's stuff that at some point helped like, kind of kept me in certain, modes of operation, because if you can't, how do you prove that like your stuff is working? And so it can actually fuck with your mind a little bit. It can mess with you a little bit, because you got the talent, and you're helping these companies or these people or whatever it might be, right? Yeah.
So I had to throw that out there.
No,
I want to hear what happened to this woman, but so
yeah, and really after she released that block, it's like people all of a sudden started listening to her. It's like this invisibility cloak.
How did she release it? Like she just
pulled off of her,
just knowing it, and then
she came back for 3 more healing sessions. And we just released that. Just think of it as an onion, and you're just pulling it out energetically from her energy.
Right.
You're just unrooting it, and that's what we did. We just unrooted that belief.
And so, and part of unrooting the belief is you understand that it exists, and then how do you start working through, releasing it?
So there are many different therapy sessions out there. There are many different types of modalities that you can release.
Right.
The way, we release it is through gateway healing.
Right.
Because remember how we just spoke about, for every problem, there's an energetic blockage. There's an energetic solution for that energetic blockage. And what we try and do is go into that energetic blockage and bring in through the healing that it needs, that energetic solution. So it's going to be different depending on which mode of therapy that you use. use, but there's certainly so much out there. There's so much candy out there right now.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's, but I mean, it's phenomenal. I think the start of anything to correct anything is to first have an understanding of what it is, and then it's to work.
Absolutely. That is the start. And, there's actually, talking about understanding of what it is, there's another really interesting story that kind of comes to mind where we really needed understanding for this client that came in through. So there's this man that came in through, and he was a very successful man. But he was so drained and exhausted. I mean, drained and exhausted. And he owned this really successful company. It wasn't mega big. He had 30 employees.
Still big.
Yeah.
Still some, right?
It definitely is still something. And it was good enough for him, if that makes sense. And I want to say after all his expenses and were paid off, and his net profit ended up being around, I want to say 1.3 million. To 1.5 million. And what was really amazing about this man is he had so much gratitude. So much gratitude. I mean, when he was sitting on my couch, he was humble, he was grateful. I just loved his energy. And he shared, his life with me and how he has had to make so many choices, Matt, for his business becoming successful. He has had to make so many changes in his life in order for his business to become successful. And, he started telling me about all these changes that he's had to make in his life. He had this really beautiful house that he loved. It was a family home that was, kind of passed down through the generations in a very beautiful neighborhood. He was showing me pictures of it with so much love for it. And he had to end up selling the home because so many emergencies would happen in his factory. And his factory was like an hour or so commute.
Right.
So he had to literally sell that house and find a house an hour, closer to the factory. It really felt like a loss for him having to do that. But it also became extremely inconvenient. He would just pop in and out, of the factory, whenever he needed to. And then, he shared that, he was in a relationship with this woman that he ended up marrying that, really showed herself to be very supportive and, wanting him to really make his dreams come true and just really helping him build. But as time went by, she started, I want to say, becoming a little bit more attention grabbing and I want to say needy. And started asking for more and more of his time. And, then he would give more of his time, but then that wasn't good enough. And then he had to start, bending backwards over for this woman. And finally, she gave him the ultimatum, me or your work. So sell your company and stay with me. I know.
What's the alternative? I mean, okay, sell the company and live off of
the money.
Is there enough?
I think for him there actually would have been. Okay. But, he found it so unfair that this woman was asking him to sell his love. For him, I think it was actually a very selfish move, very, very selfish move. So, and then, he ended up getting a divorce from her. And then...
lots of sacrifices.
So many. And then lots of compromises. And, he continued to share that he had to continue to put away a lot of hours for work. So he was raised loving holidays. I mean, all holidays were a huge family tradition. And he noticed that when he misses the big holidays, he loses a lot of sales. And so he had to start missing out on all the holidays, all his time with his loved ones so that, his company would do well and, keep up on sales because there were certain things that he only could do. And so he was coming to me, Matt, because he was exhausted and he wanted help with this exhaustion that he was going through. So what do? We put him on the healing table and give him a healing. And during the healing session, he says to me, Katie, I'm seeing visions of my father. And I said, okay, just note them all down and we'll talk about them at the end. And so after the healing session, he started telling me about his father a little bit. And his father worked in the government section, and he had a very unique job of secret intelligence. So his job was always on the move, very secretive. They moved the family around so many times, and not just from state to state, like with regular, government or military jobs. It was from country to country sometimes. And so there wasn't a lot of stability when he was growing up. There was a lot of movement for him. He never got too comfortable being in one school because, 2 years later, he's somewhere else, And then, his father... he remembers stories of his father being injured in the hospital. He remembers like a bullet lodged in his father's arm once, and but they were a little vague to him because he was younger, and so sometimes his father's job would mean his father would be injured. It took a toll on his own body, and then he tells me that one day his father comes home and he hears of a conversation that his father has with his mother of how his father has been asked to change his identity and his last name. And his father was so hurt by it because he loved the family name. He had extreme pride for it. So losing that was gut-wrenching to him. And, he was hiding and listening to this conversation, and he ran down the stairs and he said, Daddy, why are we changing our name? And he said, Katie, I will never forget what my father said. He said to me, son, when you want to move forward and be successful in life, sometimes we just have to sacrifice parts of ourselves.
Ooh.
And that belief that his father said to him that day got stamped into his psyche so strong, Matt, to the point where every decision of his life in the future, everything that even attracted into his life became a sacrifice. Losing family holidays, losing his wife, losing his favorite house. He was successful. He was moving forward. But there was always sacrifice involved. So that's, Matt, what we call a sabotaging belief. And a lot of entrepreneurs have sabotaging beliefs that may not sound like that one, but that are really getting in the way of their success happening with the ease and flow that it can happen with. If that makes any sense.
It does. And my mind's already racing because it should be ease and flow.
Yeah. And, it doesn't mean that hard work's not necessary.
Right. That's part, right? It's the staple.
Yeah. But, it doesn't have to be this intense amount of exhaustion that this man was going through. It didn't have to be compromising everything to get, where you're at, And another way to even know that you have hidden saboteurs is for some people, for some entrepreneurs, they can only make it to a certain level of their career, and then they can't go anything further past that. They can only reach a certain amount of sales, or they can only reach a certain amount of, clients per week, or, whatever it is, and they just can't go past that, or they can't make it into the bigger arena that they want. And usually in cases like that, Matt, there's a hidden energy that is sabotaging it. That is definitely one sign of knowing that there's a saboteur underneath. Another one is that, I've seen it where people finally get what they wanted. It's finally in their view. Like they can finally grab a hold of it. And all of a sudden they shut down. They just shut down and they don't grab it, even though it's in their view and they've been waiting or working for years to get it. As it starts coming up in their, mirror right in front of them and they can see it, they just shut down. They just don't grab it. They just switch off.
Is it that they just can't, there's enough of a blockage they can't even see it, even though it's right in front of them, or they can see it, but their body just won't let them.
It can be both.
Really?
It can be both, where it can be right in front of them and they're absolutely blind to it. And it can be where it's right in front of them and they will just do something to sabotage it. So that's another way that there's a hidden saboteur in your energy. So that is, I want to say, Matt, the second reason why some entrepreneurs are having blockages towards their success.
Is there a way for entrepreneurs or creatives to get the signal? Like, is there anything that they can look out for that goes, wait a minute, that might be saboteur energy? Like, is there a signal that they can kind of pay attention to for themselves?
Yeah, just like we were talking about right now, many signals. One of the signals is just what we were saying, how they reach up to a level and they just can't go any further. That is a signal usually that something is sabotaging it. Or, they're almost at that peak of the mountain. They've just almost gotten there and then they just slide right back down to the bottom. That is a signal that there's something sabotaging it. So there's a lot of signals like that. Absolutely.
It's interesting. And then in those moments, that's where they have to make some sort of a change or go inside and...
In those moments, you book a healing session. At least that's what I always do.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Okay, so let's say, obviously, it requires a little bit of them having to go in and do a little bit more of the work. Is there anything that they can do? Okay, let me ask you this. Once they figure it out and they've gone through their own personal healing of that blockage, is it gone for good?
You know how you'll know if it's gone for good?
How?
If you start seeing outer results.
Interesting.
Yeah. So when you start seeing movement in your outer life, then it's gone for good. If you've done, let's just say, some work on yourself, some, just like you said, internal reflection and healing, but you're still seeing the same patterns again, then you need to go back in and do more work, and that there are many more layers of the onion that need to be peeled.
Okay. So, I mean, it's, again, balance, because you might see in some areas of your life changing in the outer world, but as you're growing, there might be a couple of other areas that sneak in. You're like, oh, I've seen this before, and it's happening again. So I need to make sure that, I need to check in with myself and go right back in and, kind of make adjustments. It's being very present and aware.
Yes. And, you may have multiple onions in there that are causing multiple issues.
Yeah.
Just think of like weeds all over your garden. And if you pull one weed, by your front door, it doesn't mean the weed at the back door is not going to stop growing. Yeah. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
They each have to be dealt with individually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And sometimes the blockages aren't, Matt, what we think they are, or sometimes they're, I want to say they're not as evident. And to give you another story, this woman came in, into a healing session with me, and she was very frustrated, Matt. She has had opened multiple business ventures, and many of them had not worked out. And she was coming in because she's like, Katie, I'm starting a new thing. I've been going at it for about 9 months now. And I just want to make sure this doesn't end up the way those did.
I completely get that. Yeah.
She was trying to catch
being
that
proactive.
Pattern.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And she was telling me about her idea, and I thought it was actually really cute. She had this idea of where she was going to kind of open like a very chic manicure pedicure type of a place for women that can come, and as they're sitting there, they get champagne, and they get like a card reader coming in and giving them a card reading, and it was just this cute way of, and then you can come with your friends and so it was this cute way of enjoying a great time with your friend, getting a manicure or pedicure, and, hearing an uplifting message, and just, lots of fun, right? And so, she'd put this concept out for 9 months, and, she said, Katie, I'm just not getting the traction that I want for this. And so I said, okay, and let's get you on the healing table and, let's just start doing some work. And so I put her on the healing table and, she's, doing the session and doing her part of it. And I kid you not, Matt, I start seeing visions of my head, almost like I'm looking through her energy. And it was these images of this woman just wanted to be in the spotlight. There were images of like this woman on every magazine cover, images of this woman with celebrities, images of making all the women around her jealous, because of the cash that's flowing in through. And it was just really, really interesting. And, of course, I didn't say anything to her. And so after the session was done, I just looked at her straight in the eye. And I said, honey, if you were to be extremely 100% honest with yourself in the depths of who you are, why are you really opening this business? And I kid you not, this was her word, or words. She said, I want to be a boss babe millionaire, bitch.
Oh, wow.
Those were her words.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, I was impressed that she was honest.
Yeah.
That this is what she was doing. But also in the healing session, I realized that this woman only cares about, I want to say, money and outer appearance. And even though the idea was a phenomenal one, and, in the market that she was in, it could actually catch fire really quickly, she's never going to make it far. Because, we all have, Matt, what I call this sincerity light in our heart. And when we act out of alignment with the sincerity light, the universe knows. And the universe, insincerity is like a repellent. It's literally like an energetic repellent. It's like going against your genuine purpose of sharing. And so, and that's exactly what this woman was doing. And the universe only responds to your internal representation, which means what's really going on inside. It does not respond to your external portrayal.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so not once did this girl say to me, Matt, I'm doing this to uplift other women. I'm doing this because I want women to leave feeling phenomenal about themselves. There was none of that.
Interesting. There's no why. There's no purpose in it.
There was no, I'm
just a big fuck you.
It was really just, I want to look good and I want to be in the spotlight and I want to make a lot of money and I want to just be featured in every magazine that's out there.
Interesting.
Which is great, but it's not really a genuine motivation that can really attract people and opportunities into your life. It's just because it's coming from such an insincere place. And a lot of, I want to say, entrepreneurs these days, Matt, get stuck up in spending so many hours in making sure their logo looks good. Right. Making sure they have great headshots. Making sure that they're featured here and there. And instead of keeping their focus on the substance of how is it that I'm serving people? How am I going to add value to this person's life? And, the fastest way for someone to attract something into their life is to radiate it from the depths of their heart. I mean, heart energy attracts things to you so quickly. I don't even have words for how quickly it can come in. And so that's kind of a story to show you of sometimes our blockages are kind of sneaky.
A lot of times they're sneaky.
Very sneaky, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
And just that we really have to look at our motives before we even start anything entrepreneurially. It's so important to look at our motives. And sometimes people might actually start from really good motives. Yeah. But as time goes on, they forgot the reason of why they even started it in the first place.
Absolutely.
And so their business stops being able to move forward or growing.
Yeah.
Because now their motivation has shifted towards something else.
Yeah, it's if you ask most successful people, year 5 is when it really started to kind of have that like upward swing, if you will. Not all. Obviously, you get your unicorns. That's literally what they call them, is the unicorns. Unicorns are actually being used way before pop culture started using them in the Silicon Valley, by the way. They get the unicorns. But year 5, year 8, 9 is when I think probably most of our guests have really kind of hit that stride where it was like, the money was really, really flowing. Now, think about from the time you start to the time that that real, what mainstream society would call success, if you're using a measurement as money, there's time in between there, right? And it's so important to stay in your lane. But you're dealing with your own personal blockages. You're dealing with the world around you. You're dealing with the media. You're dealing with so-and-so who just hit the startup lottery or something like that. Like, you're just like, oh shit. You know what I mean? And think about also sliding back down the rock a couple times on the way up, So it's interesting when you're right. It's easy to start with one motive and almost find yourself in a different, plus also growth and changes of yourself. Like, you realize shit that you maybe used to want that you don't. That's why the mission has to be so big that you start with, in terms of like the bigger purpose. Like you said, heart energy, right?
It has to be so sincere. It doesn't necessarily have to be big. It just has to be so sincere. Sincerity
is everything. Yeah. Wow. Well, as we get towards the end of the show, we do what we call Hustler Thought of the Day. And this is something that you were quoted as saying: the universe only responds to our internal representation, not our external portrayal, which was a great segue because you just kind of brought that up here. I feel like everything you just said really, really kind of exudes that. Do you want anything furthermore you want to talk about that between the heart energy and or maybe give some advice to people about how to kind of rein in on that heart energy?
Yeah, and also I just want to tell people that, these are just 3 different examples of blockages.
Right.
There are many other types of blockages as well. Sometimes people believe that they don't deserve it. And when they don't deserve it, they can just kind of stand on the sidelines and they don't really reach out for what they can reach out for. So that can be another, blockage that kind of blocks the heart energy from shining in through.
Yeah.
There are blockages, that people have because they're always distrusting their inner GPS system. So even though they're on the right path, they're always uncertain of whether they're doing the right thing or not. And when you send out uncertain signals into the universe, you get really scattered results back. So that's another blockage that could kind of get in the way of that heart energy that we spoke about. There's just a lot of different things. Sometimes we get a lot of beliefs passed on from our parents, our ancestors. So much. I've seen so many people with poverty consciousness that's just been passed on through the lineage over and over again. That can block that beautiful heart energy from shining in through. So I just want the listeners to know that there are many different blockages that can get in the way, and these are just some examples. And each of you are a unique concoction of beauty and blockages.
That's amazing. Where can people find out about you?
So from my website, Arizona Spiritual Events with an S. There's lots of stuff there, and you can contact me there, and also on Facebook through Katie Kyleen.
Nice. And then you also have your Arizona Spiritual Events on Facebook as well too.
Yes, I do.
Awesome. Thank you for being on. This is and for sharing your story, and for I'm sure we could probably do like a 10-part series on this. Which, by the way, we do always welcome our guests back. As we always say, this podcast is about the journey, and so everybody that comes on the show, we always welcome them back. Like 6 months from now, a year from now, looks usually very different for a lot of entrepreneurial people out there, in all these different realms and artists and creators that we have on. So you're always welcome back on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on. And, also for sharing your story, the vulnerability aspect, and the fact that like you had such a miraculous cure, is amazing. And I mean, that's
possible for everyone, Matt. I just want everyone to know that everything can be healed and to not get stuck in the hopelessness.
Yeah.
That this is their life situation and they can't get out of it.
I'm really glad you bring that up, because I want everybody to understand that it's normal and it's okay if that happens. It's not normal to stay in it, because I've dealt with it many times. You have to constantly work through it, figure it out, work through it,
Absolutely.
And you also brought up the good point about what signals you're sending out, because it can get very scattery. And I think it's so important to like take a step back constantly and be like, okay, what's really going on? What do I really, really want to do right now? And what really makes sense to me? Do you recommend meditation?
I absolutely do.
Yeah.
Yes, I love meditation. I think it's amazing. Prayer work, anything that really just kind of gets you in alignment with that energy. Yeah, is amazing. And I also just want to say to everyone that, being here on Earth, one of our prerequisites to being here is mastering the energy of being able to overcome.
Oof.
We have to be master overcomers to be able to participate here on Earth. Because let's face it, Matt, we're in the trenches here.
Yeah. Here's the trenches. The party's up there.
Yeah.
They're just watching us like, you guys. I give you all the tools in the world to succeed, and you guys just free will gets you in your way. And a lot of it's also about your soul's correction, right? You're here, right? I mean,
yes, and that is the art of overcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. We had Katie Kyleen Sabagian on. Find her on Facebook. Find her on social media. ArizonaSpiritualEvents.com. Today we spoke a lot about overcoming blockages that can get in our way of our performance, our success. And there's a lot of internal work that has to go on, and we have to really take the time to actually figure it out, not be afraid to figure it all out, not be afraid to get help. Especially in a time that we live in right now where there's so many inputs from social media and external places that the comparison game can, in some cases, become very deadly. And it's showing that in a lot of different people, and there's no reason for it. I think if you take a step back and you kind of get in your lane, even if you start at 20 miles an hour, eventually you get up to 150, just doing your own thing. And to that, I also say that, listen, if whoever's out there listening, having those kind of moments where they're really tough, don't be afraid to ask for help. That's something that, no matter what phase I'm at, I constantly ask for help. Because no man is an island, as the expression, and we can't do everything alone. We're meant to actually help each other. So thank you, Katie, for being on the show, for being on the Hustle Sold Separately. We are truly, truly grateful to have you on, and looking forward to having you back. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so for myself, Matt Gottesman, for Hustle Sold Separately this week, we appreciate you. Please feel free to give a rating and review. In fact, if you don't, I'll come find you. But truly, we're very grateful for all the ratings and reviews, and for following us on social. We appreciate you, and we are out.